Hey you, I'm Andy Powell. Welcome to the Allcast Podcast. No topic is off the table. I hope you enjoy. My guest today is Emilie Christman. Emilie obtained her Bachelor's of Social Work in 2005 from Northern Arizona University. She completed her Master's of Social Work in 2010 from Arizona State University and specialized in child welfare. Both programs are accredited by the National Association of Social Workers. Emilie obtained her social work license in 2020. She has over 20 years of experience working with various client populations, including adults and children with disabilities, children with emotional disturbances, the elderly, within the child welfare system, in healthcare and the hospital setting, and as a mental health therapist for children, families, and adults. Emilie's practice and her philosophical approach to therapy is based on social work principles and the belief that every human being has inherent worth, dignity, and value, and in self-determination, which honors each individual's right to choose one's own path, state of consciousness, purpose, and destiny, and that each individual knows best what is needed for their own healing. Therapy is a collaborative, joint venture where knowledge and skills are combined to create meaningful solutions and positive outcomes. Because everyone is unique, Emilie uses a variety of therapeutic modalities to provide support, help facilitate healing and change so that each individual can function at their own best to achieve balance and joy in their daily life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's a passion, an honor, and a privilege for Emilie to be able to serve and support doing the work that she does in our community. Emilie, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good. This is your first time listening to yourself in headphones.
Yes. It's quite different.
Yeah, it is. So we have a lot of stuff we could talk about. And you sent me that list, and I kind of went through and picked a few things and added a couple things, and we'll start off basically with who you are and what you do. So what do you do, Emilie?
So I currently work as a psychotherapist, and I see a lot of people each day and work on all kinds of stuff, basically whatever they want to work on.
So you're what people refer to as a shrink, right?
Yeah.
Why do they call it that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know the history of that, where that term came from, but, I just imagine that there's negative connotations there that, they're going to shrink my brain or whatever.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know.
I was thinking of a good one. If you shrink your focus, you can do better on improving yourself. But anywho, so you see different people all day long for an hour at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the qualifications that you need to get a job doing that?
So you need to have a license. So I have a bachelor's degree in social work, and then I went on to get a master's, and then I had to get a license, and right now I have an associate license, and in about a month, I'll be getting the next licensure, which is a clinical social work license. And to get that, you have to do a whole bunch of therapy hours under supervision. And so I'm just about done with that. I actually have only about 3 hours left that need to be supervised, and then come June 1st, I'll be able to apply and then take a test, and then I'll be able to practice social work, clinical social work independently.
Oh, that's what it gets you. Okay. Because right now you have to do it for some other agency.
Yes, you have to have someone to supervise you.
Ah, right on. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's been a long road to kind of get to this place, and I'm excited because I'm going to hopefully be starting a private practice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That'd be great. All right. How long have you been doing that, the therapy work?
So, I've been in the field of social work for like at least 20 years. I kind of went into it pretty much like right after high school. And I did some counseling work with kids for about 3 years, which I did under supervision. And then I kind of went off and did some other things and just came back to this and have been doing it for the last 2 years just to move through the getting the license.
Cool. Wow, it's a long time. What inspired you to do this? What made you want to pursue this field?
Well, I think I always knew I wanted to be in a helping profession, probably since I was like 12 years old, honestly. I can kind of remember back to being that age and hearing about like psychotherapists and like Freud and just people who did that psychological work in helping people. And I remember asking like, oh, what do you have to do to be able to do that? Like, how much school do you have to go to? And I remember like hearing, oh yeah, you have to go to college for like 4 years and then you have to do like a master's degree and I was like, oh, I don't think I'm smart enough to do that. I think that's too much work. And I kind of gave up on the idea, honestly. Like I really couldn't see that for myself at that point. I was like, okay, maybe I'll figure out something different. Like that's too much school.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It is.
And those medical doctors, they go 8 years or more.
Yeah.
That's just, no.
That's a commitment right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I
better be driven.
Say again?
I said you better be driven.
Yes, definitely. With the patients that you see, how long do you generally see one patient for as far as weeks or months? And how much effect do you see the therapy sessions have on that person?
Wow. It varies so much from person to person. I think when I came into this working with adults, I had this idea like, okay, maybe 6 months is a good amount of time to work with somebody. Like you could make a difference in that. And I kind of thought about like people that would say, oh yeah, I've been seeing my therapist for the last 20 years. And I'm like, what kind of therapist is that? Like, that's a long time. Like, shouldn't you have made progress by now? Like to be able to let go of that. And maybe I was a little judgy of that. Like people that would have a client for a couple years or, but now after I'm getting into it, my specialty is kind of trauma work. And complex trauma too. And when you're working with people that have those issues, I think it does take longer. I mean, you're working with them for an hour a week and it's 1 hour out of their week, and, they're doing some work on their own in between those times. But some of the clients that I started working with this agency 2 years ago, I still have, and they still have work to do. And I think I've let go of some of that judgment about how long it takes, because it's very individualized. But other ones I have just cycled through. They, maybe they don't have a lot of complex trauma. They're just looking for some skills that they can apply in their life, and they take those and they run with them. And, that could vary. I could see somebody for like 12 sessions and they might be like, okay, I'm good. Like, thank you so much, and go on my way. It just really depends on the person and where they're at.
Okay, that's way more variable than I expected. The people that you've been seeing for 2 years or so, have you seen progress? Have they made progress, even though they have a lot more to do?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And how do you gauge that? I'm sure it depends on the type of trauma, the person, and the type of therapy you're doing to address that trauma.
So we do use like screening tools so that can measure like their anxiety, their depression. So we revisit those from time to time. Usually we do those initially just to see where they're at, and they're self-rating basically. So a lot of it is self-report. And a lot of it is just what they tell you, like how they're doing with their functioning in their life, how close they feel to like they are to achieving their goals that they've set. And we do set pretty clear goals that are identified by them. And so they can answer, whether those are met and they're clear. And
okay. as a therapist, do you see a therapist?
I don't see one right now, but I did see one that was pretty awesome for me. Maybe it was about 4 years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And she was pretty inspiring for me to want to get trained in EMDR therapy. I had done a research paper on EMDR therapy during my master's program, and how effective it is for treating trauma. And I don't know if you know much about that type of therapy, but it's eye movement reprocessing and desensitization. That's what it stands for, EMDR. And it uses eye movements or bilateral stimulation, and you use that along with processing trauma. And I don't know, when I did the research on it, it was like a lot of people like, oh, we don't really know how this works, but we know that it does work and it's clinically proven to work. So I was pretty interested in it. And when I had some of my own traumatic experiences that I wanted to process, I specifically sought out an EMDR therapist. And she was tremendously helpful. So.
Wow. So is that set for a certain length of time and then you reassess?
What do you mean by that?
So like, I'm a therapist. Someone comes to me. We decide on EMDR, and then we say, okay, we're going to do this for 12 weeks and then see where we're at.
I don't necessarily set a time limit on it, although I do ask them to commit to at least 10 sessions to do the EMDR work.
Okay.
So just to, they're going to give it a good try and see how it goes.
What is bilateral stimulation and how do you do it?
So you can do it in many different ways. It's just basically, you can do it with eye movements by either having your eye movements go back and forth. Yes, just like that.
Like I do it on my own?
Yes, you can do it on your own. I have some software that I use with it that also includes sound. So with the software I have, they have a ball on the screen that goes back and forth.
Okay.
And then you can watch that, and simultaneously it provides sound alternating in both ears. You can also use tapping on both sides, either side of the body. And that provides it. And yeah, it's notable that, we engage in a lot of activities in our normal life that includes bilateral stimulation, like walking down a gravel road or like drumming. So it's just kind of interesting that, that is an effective way to kind of process things.
So all you're doing is giving some sort of input to each half of the brain?
Basically. You're having it go back and forth. And, that's kind of what happens when you're in REM sleep. So when you're in REM sleep, your eyes are going back and forth really rapidly, and it's stimulating, both sides of the brain. And for whatever reason, it puts you in a state of mind that helps you to process things pretty quickly.
Is that similar to a trance state or a hypnosis? Is that a state of hypnosis?
I don't think it's quite the same.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't know how to describe the differences. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And I've heard of EMDR, and I've heard that it's really effective and it can address all sorts of different stuff. What is your favorite, this might be a twisted question, but what's your favorite issue or trauma or disorder to address or to work with? Or the one that fascinates you the most?
I don't know that I'm specifically fascinated by any of the trauma, but I will say, like any particular trauma, but I will say that the process of helping someone to move through that and watch the changes that occur fascinates me.
That's awesome. Okay. And what other methods do you like to use other than EMDR?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, strength-based therapy. What else is there? I don't know. I just grab from all the tools in the toolbox,
Okay.
basically.
Cool. Do you have to get like certified in each of those?
Not necessarily. The EMDR one does require that you have a formal training in order to practice it. But the ones like dialectical behavioral or cognitive behavioral, those are just kind of basic. Like you could take trainings on your own, you know.
Cool.
So,
Right on.
yeah. Oh, and then we had talked a little earlier this week about internal family systems.
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah. I did one session of IFS with a guy, and it was really effective. I liked it a lot. It was effective because it surprised me at how easy it was to separate the parts of the mind, or kind of decide that this is going to go over here. I feel this in my body, and then kind of noticing what's happening and where, and then you can address it from there. Mm-hmm. Will you break that down a little bit? What are the different parts? There's a limited number of parts, right? No. Okay, so there's an unlimited number of potential parts that you could designate things happening within your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I first was kind of introduced more to that therapy when I took my EMDR training. They taught us how to do some work with that. And one of the cool things is that they had kind of a template for like a visualization activity that you can walk people through. And that involves having them visualize a room that they've never been in before and a table. And then they're just going to have, like, see who shows up at the table. Like, in terms of, like, parts of yourself that might show up. And then they get to kind of describe, like, what they see. If they're, like, inviting all the parts of themselves to this table and they describe that, and you be amazed what people actually come up with. Because, you know, the first time I like walked somebody through that, I'm like, what if there's like nobody there? Or like, you know, what do I do with this? I'm not sure. But it's, you know, you give people a little bit to just go with their imagination, and, you know, you'd be amazed who shows up. I mean, just, yeah. And I have some clients that really got into that parts work, and they have like this part with a certain name, and this is like representing like the cool part of them that they show to everybody else. And then there's like, you know, a sad part of them, and then there's like almost a robotic part of them, like all these different things.
So it's like you're developing a character almost, and you're starting to recognize the traits of that character that is you when you're in that state of being.
Correct.
Okay. And that way you can assess it from a kind of a removed or a detached perspective.
Yes.
And that
exactly.
way you can see things in and
so yeah, you're looking at like parts of yourself being like sets of beliefs, behaviors, coping skills, and you're kind of being observing as those parts show up in different parts of your life, kind of to help you. And they all are there to help you, you know. And then there's also, you're looking at, you know, when people are experiencing conflict, a lot of times that has to do with different parts of themselves that are in conflict. And so if you can help the parts kind of work together better, and you have the person that's in control being in a place of like mindfulness, where they're not just unconsciously stepping into like a set of behaviors or beliefs, that they have more control and a better ability to emotionally regulate, and be more conscious in choosing how they're responding to things.
Wow, that's awesome. Sounds really helpful.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Sometimes I give my clients like little examples of, you know, how I've worked with myself on things. One of those was at one point in my life, I had this dream that I was on a ship, and there was like this vampire bitch, and I was trying to hunt her down and kill her. And I was like searching this whole ship and like looking in every area. And I had this like, wooden stake or whatever, because I was like, okay, you have to like stab him in the heart or whatever. That was how I thought I was going to kill her. And I was like hunting her down on this ship, and finally found her like in the lower level of this ship and opened this closet, and there she was. And I stabbed her in the heart, like I got her, but the bitch wouldn't die. And I was really trying to analyze this dream, like, why did I dream this? And I kind of came to the conclusion, like, because a lot of times when I'm looking at dreams, I love, like, breaking down the meanings of dreams and, looking at it from a perspective of other people that you're dreaming about can represent parts of yourself. And so I was like, okay, so this is, like, a part of myself, and it's the vampire bitch, like, and started to really kind of think about that part of myself and, how I felt about it. And obviously I'd wanted to hate it. I wanted her to die. I didn't want that part to exist. But started to realize the ways that she was useful to me. And so, in my life, I realized that she would kind of like flare up or make herself known when there was some way that I wasn't getting a need met, or I wasn't able to communicate what I needed. And so that's when she would show up. And so then I started to become mindful of that. Like, oh, the vampire bitch is showing up. Like, what's going on? Where are my unmet needs? And how can I deal with that in a way that's not destructive towards other people? Where I can kind of ask, like, okay, what do you need? Like, what's the unmet need? And then figure out how to resolve that in a healthier way. And yeah, the vampire bitch, she's still in there, and she might come up a little bit, but like, I'm not just letting her take over. Like, I'm not going to just step in and be like, now I'm vampire bitch, you haven't met my needs, like, and start blaming other people or whatever. So that's just one kind of example of, how a part of ourselves, which we may perceive as negative, is actually there as a protector.
That's a good example. When that would happen in the past, what exactly would it be projected toward? Would it be projected toward people around you that your needs weren't met?
I think
or
so.
Just kind of a general attitude you're carrying at the time?
Yeah. Well, I think it specifically came up in like romantic relationships for me, when I was in a relationship where, I felt like my needs weren't being met, and I was angry about it, and, probably took it out on the other person, probably was like blaming or angry or appeared in that sort of way. But yeah, that's not like the dynamics that I want to be creating with other people. So.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
So when you had the dream that it was a vampire and that it was you, and would you say that in the real life interactions, did the vampire aspect apply as if you're like sucking energy from people, or was it?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know that I was sucking energy, but I think it was that, maybe I needed some energy, and maybe I was, reaching out for that from external sources. And maybe that was part of the lesson as well. Just, that we can learn how to kind of generate our own energy and maintain our own energy. And we don't need to, rely on external sources necessarily, other people for that. People are going to maybe disappoint us at times, or not be there in the ways that we wish they could be.
Yeah, that's true, especially in romantic relationships.
Yeah.
It seems to be the fertile ground for that.
Yeah.
A lot of difficult stuff comes up there.
For sure. I think that we're mirrors for each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about your belief system transitioning and that story that you had. Will you tell me a little bit about that story and about the experience that you had that shifted your view of belief, or at least your own personal beliefs?
Yeah, and are you referring to kind of the letter that I wrote, the Dear God letter?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I kind of want to go back a little bit, like before that. So my spirituality, I think I've always been spiritual. My parents both became Lutheran pastors. They went to seminary when I was I think they started when I was 9 years old. They, previous to that, had been, let's see, my dad worked for a police department as a crisis interventional specialist, and my mom was working as a social worker, actually. And then, I don't know, some crazy stuff happened in their life, and they decided to just switch up their career, and they felt that God spoke to them and told them they needed to go to seminary and become pastors.
Wow.
And so
that's a big change.
Yeah. We lived in Phoenix at the time and are pretty settled in our life, nice home with a pool, and things were good. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh yeah, God called us. We need to move. We're going to move to Dubuque, Iowa, and we're going to live in a trailer park and have no income for 4 years while we go to school." And so that was a big shift as a kid. But I was kind of my parents are crazy. They say that God talks to them, and all these spiritual things happening to them. Oh, we were driving by this church and the wheels of the car just wanted to turn into the church, and one night the Holy Spirit came through our house like a great wind, all these big experiences that my parents had where I was kind of okay, well, I guess I'll just roll with what they're doing, but I don't really get it. So I kind of grew up with that influence, I guess. When I was in middle school, I went through an experience where we moved a lot because we had to do that when they were in seminary. They went to seminary for 2 years. We moved and went on an internship with them. We went back. There was another move. And then when they got done with seminary, we moved to another town. So there was just a lot of moving. So once they got ordained and they got called to be in this town in Wisconsin, moved to that town, and I was pretty new there. I was in 7th grade when I moved there. And when I was in 8th grade, I went through some pretty serious bullying from these girls. That was pretty traumatic for me, honestly. I don't think I acknowledged that for that being as big of a trauma as what it was. But basically, everybody in the school hated me. At 1 year, I walked to school, and I remember one particular day where I was walking to school, and I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach, and we would wait outside the door, and the whole school turned around, and they would "Go home, Schubert." That was my last name before it was Christman. So, and that was the whole year for me. So it was a lot of why am I being rejected by these people? It was a pretty small town, so and it was the only school in the town. So there wasn't really an escape from that.
That is a small town.
Yeah. The high school there was 400 people in the whole high school. And that was the only high school in the town. So at that time, I remember I was totally crushed emotionally, just totally rejected, and felt I had no friends, and was why is this happening? And I found myself down in the basement of my house, and that was the first time that I picked up a Bible, and I was just this book's here on the table, and I just flipped it open, and I was in a really bad state of mind, and it was I opened it up right to Psalms, where it was the enemies are more than the hairs on my head, and why do and I was what? What's happening?
One of those living word moments.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so that was kind of a little bit of food there, where I was oh,
maybe there's something to this.
Maybe. Yeah. But I didn't really, I was always skeptical. I was I'm not going to go to church and buy this crap that they're selling. Why should I believe this? And I couldn't make sense out of the story. And I'm it didn't, the way that people taught it, I couldn't receive it at that moment. Mm-hmm. But then, I don't know, I had an experience in the end of high school where I was a pretty rebellious teenager. Just, had the boyfriend with the motorcycle with the black leather jacket that didn't wear a helmet and liked to drink and drive, just bad, kind of a lot of different influences. And when I was about to graduate high school, I flunked out, even though I was already accepted in college. I just flunked out of high school.
Just kind of gave in or gave up?
I was just cutting class, smoking pot with my friends, like trying to figure out like what's this life about, because I know it's not like at school. Like I know there's nothing there for me. And so, different relationships with people and friends, and that was kind of my life. And then, I just flunked out of high school, threw a party in my parents' house, and like lost my job, like all in like the same week. And my parents were like, we're kicking you out. Like, you can't live here. We're not going to support your irresponsibility, I think is what they told me. And so I was just like out, and I was kind of like, yeah, I'm out.
Thank God, finally. Yeah. Were you 18 at the time?
I was 18. Yep. I was 18 and was just like basically deciding to kind of like, in their mind, screw up my life. But so I just ended up that kind of, I don't know, I questioned all my friends that I had at that point, and I was like, are they real friends? And I was just trying to figure stuff out, and it ended up where I decided I was just going to travel. I wasn't going to have a real job. I wasn't going to do the normal thing that people do. I just wanted to figure out what this life was about, and I ended up meeting like a friend in like, well, I didn't know him, but a stranger on the street in Madison, Wisconsin, this guy. And I was like, he seemed cool. And
he's got a car.
Well, no, he didn't have a car, but I had a cool car. I had a red Camaro with T-tops.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah.
So you picked up a hitchhiker.
Like, well, I met him down on the State Street in Madison, Wisconsin, which is, I don't know if you know Madison, but it's a college town. It's a very hippie town. And I just ran into this guy, and I was like, my life's a mess. Like, I'm just trying to figure out my friendships, and like my parents won't let me live there, and like I just want to like experience life. And he was kind of like, yeah, my girlfriend just broke up with me, and my life's a mess, and I don't have anybody here. Like, let's just like go travel. And we ended up doing that, and it was kind of my first kind of like, I don't know, really crazy spiritual experience, I guess, because I found myself just kind of leaving that town in the middle of the night. It was like late at night, and I remember I was crying when I left, because I was like, most of my friends were not my real friends, and like, just a lot of emotional stuff going on. And I like cried myself to sleep as we were driving away from that town, just headed west, don't know where we're going. And slept all night, woke up the next morning, and the guy I was with said, yeah, I've been driving all night and I need to sleep, so it's your turn. And I kind of like, okay, cool. And I got in the driver's seat, and it was like the middle of like North Dakota, where it's just, there's nothing. And it was like the bright light of day, because it was just dawn just hit, and it was just like stark emptiness. And this guy goes to sleep on the, seat next to me, and there I am driving, and I have no idea like where I'm going, what the heck I'm doing. And I pretty much like, it was like a mental breakdown. Like I was just, all of like everything just kind of hit me, and I was driving, and I was just like gripped with so much fear and like resistance. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't have any plans. I know nothing. Like, I can't go back where I came from. I don't know where I'm headed. Like, and it was just, I was total like in this state of fear. And I just like, what the hell did I do? And then something came over me, like while I was driving, and I was in this complete state of fear. And all of a sudden it was like, you have a choice. Like, and I almost saw it like a gear shift. And it was like you can either choose fear on this side, and you can like be in that state of mind, or you can just like shift it over, and like you can just be in love and just like accept like everything. And I did. Like right then I was just like, I can't take it. Like, I'm in so much fear, and I just shifted and I shifted into like acceptance, which was just like love.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. And you know what? That shaped like my whole journey. Like, and I really feel like I just shifted into a place of acceptance, and I was just in that mental state, and then it was like everything that came was like exactly what I needed. Like, I ran into like the right people at the right times, and I was like in this freedom state. And I really feel like, as I reflect on it now, like it was the Holy Spirit with me. Like, the Holy Spirit just came and like flowed through me and like brought me things and brought me people and used me as like a way to kind of like show other people. Like, it's kind of crazy at the time, but I think I convinced like one guy to just like quit his job and like, just like do what he wanted to do, because he was like so like trapped, like he was in a prison. I was like, you don't have to be, like, you can be free like me,
Yeah.
And he was like, oh my gosh,
You're right. I quit.
yeah, he was like, I'm gonna go quit right now. And he was
Oh,
like,
wow.
thank you so much. But I mean, the whole thing was like that. It was learning experience. It ended up being about 3 months of just traveling. I went to Montana, stayed there for a while, went to Idaho, and then Northern California, and like down the coast. And then I went to Arizona, and then I went back across and like went to like Tennessee, and just like a whole little thing that was like 3 months, and then ended me up back where I was. But I think that was kind of like the introduction into like spirituality, because I started praying and I was like very connected, and not so much with like Jesus, but just like a relationship with God, where I was like, show me what I need and like help me on my way.
And he did.
And he did. And
wow. So you landed back in Wisconsin?
I did. And I kind of was in the mindset, like at that point, like I felt like kind of like a leaf that was blowing in the wind, and that became like very tattered on rocks and stuff. Cause I was like, depending on a lot of other people for the things that I needed at that time. I didn't have a job or income or anything. And so I was pretty resolved to like, I need to get a job. I need to get some stability. I need to not depend on other people. I need to get into school, because I felt like that was important. But at that time, that's kind of what led me into like a social work field, because I really wanted a job where I was doing something meaningful and serving other people. And so I got a job working in group homes with disabled adults and being a caregiver, and kind of doing that for a while.
Sounds like a tough job.
It was probably one of the most, it's very rewarding for me. I learned so much. I worked with people with some different issues. At one point, even a woman that had cerebral palsy that could not speak. It was like her body just wouldn't cooperate with her, and she had difficulty moving any part of it, but she was fully cognizant of what was happening and fully there mentally, and she would communicate with her eyes. So she was like, yeah, she'd look up for yes and look down to the left for no. And that was like the only way that I could communicate with her. But it was like, I wanted to get to know this woman. And so it was like hours of like, I'd get to know her and ask her questions, and just like, we would end up, laughing, and I could get her sense of humor and make her laugh. And
wow.
Learned how to like really put yourself in someone else's shoes, like with compassion, like, and doing something as simple as like helping someone get dressed for the day, making sure that they were comfortable, that you weren't just jamming clothes onto their, body, or putting clothes on them that they don't want to wear, giving them choices and autonomy and understanding. And she used to wake up like 3 or 4 times a night, like, because she needed to be changed. And it was like taking care of a newborn, which like prepped me for my kids, because like, I would have to get up and not be mad, and not be like frustrated, and just do the work and show up with compassion and put my own needs on the back burner. And yeah.
Wow. So you're able to look past the person's disability and see their personhood and connect with that instead. Whereas oftentimes, most people don't see someone every day or much of the time that are missing a leg or missing their legs or can't walk or things like that. So when they do see it, it's like, oh, there's kind of a spectacle there. Yeah. And they don't see the person, they see the disability. Yeah. And that's got to be really tough for those people that have the disability. Yeah. It's got to be a lot to work with. Wow. Yeah. So you were working, doing that job, and then you went to school. And what did you believe throughout that time up until the letters that you wrote, the shift?
I think I was maybe more into like just a relationship with God, but a lot of New Age stuff resonated with me. During that time, I was hanging out with a bunch of hippies in Madison. We had drum circles, we had crystals everywhere. We were like growing gardens and, talking about energy and stuff. And like, it was, and I fully like am on board with all of that stuff today.
Did you wear shoes?
When I had to,
Yeah. Did you wash your hair?
I did.
Yeah.
I did wash my hair. It was clean. Yep.
Yeah. Well, the hippies get some things right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you do psychedelics?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Did you do a lot of psychedelics?
Probably. I mean, how do you compare that? Probably not as much as my husband did, but.
Well, I guess what I mean, did you do it frequently?
I think not very frequently. I mean, I think, I used marijuana for recreationally, never like daily, but, just to, change your consciousness a little bit, and recreationally, like maybe a few times a week. And, I tried LSD when I was like in high school and stuff. I mean, I was trying all that stuff when I was like starting at like 15, I think. But yeah, you just also using the mushrooms, LSD, just as a way to like have a spiritual, experience, change your consciousness, be open to new things, have new experiences, and just like explore.
Did you feel like you were connecting to God when you would use those things?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you believe that that's what that is currently?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it changes your state of consciousness, and I mean, you're going to do with it what you're going to do. For me, I guess I took it to a spiritual place. I remember, taking mushrooms one time, and like we had this big fire, like on this, it was on like, I think it was the Wisconsin River. And it was like beautiful night sky with like a full moon, and like, the fire like crackled and like popped and sparks went up in the sky. And I was just like, it's proof, like God exists. Like to me, like a fire crackling meant that. I mean, it's like, how do you get that? But no, to me, I was like, proof right there. How can they not see it?
I know what you mean. Yeah. There's just this moment that the impact that things have when you are in that state is just so much stronger than when you're in normal waking consciousness. Yeah. Yeah. And that was another one of the things on the list was consciousness. Like what is the nature of it? And my first thought was like, we don't really understand it. I mean, how would you define the word consciousness?
Consciousness. I don't know. It has to do with just awareness. I mean, I feel like the word is like self-explanatory. It's just an awareness of what is.
So to somebody who's learning English, that's what you would say that consciousness means? An awareness of what is?
I think so.
Cool. Let me see. What would I define consciousness as? I think an awareness of my own presence. Probably what I would say. Let's see what the internet says.
Yeah.
The state or condition of being conscious, not helpful. Number 2, a sense of one's personal or collective identity, including the attitudes, beliefs, and sensitivities held by or considered characteristics of an individual or group. I think that's a pretty good definition. A sense of your collective identity.
Yeah.
Right on.
So, did you want me to share anything about the letter thing? Because I don't think I mentioned anything about that. Like, I'm like,
no,
just
you're
moving
like,
on.
Let me go back a little bit.
I had to go back
because
I was like, that was kind of like becoming spiritual, right? But then, and experimenting with all the substances and kind of living my life. And I think that I had a very, like, intentional way of living, like being aware that I'm a spiritual being primarily, and that I kind of wanted to be in a position where I'm like helping other people and I'm loving people. But I really think that as I went through life, I kind of lost that connection. And part of that was having kids and having to worry about supporting them financially and bills and just adult responsibilities and work and all of that stuff. And I feel like I kind of slipped more into like unconsciousness in some ways.
Routine.
Yes.
Yeah. Just
mundane life.
Yeah. A lot of that self-reflection and contemplation you have to set aside in order to achieve those other, they feel petty sometimes, but the necessary, the adult responsibilities, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so I just feel like I wasn't living in a way that was in awareness of myself as a spiritual being in the world. And I think that, my life got into a bad place because I wasn't in that awareness. And some difficult things happened. A bunch of difficult things happened. And that's kind of when it led me back to like being I was in such a place of desperation at one point that I was just like, I really need like relief from pain. I really need help. What can I do for that?
That was actually a very good description for what happened to me when I came back to becoming a Christian. Because I was outside of it for 13 years. I was raised Christian and I was all about it. Wow. And then some things happened. I couldn't fill in the gaps. And then I was like, I'm going to go look for answers over here now. And I found a lot of things that I thought were answers that turned out to be part of the truth.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's what it is, just part of the truth. But that level of suffering and internal anguish and desperation made me cry out as well. And that cry was answered very tangibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the bullet points of suffering that you went through to get to that point of crying out?
Well, I think, what can I reflect on? I think the biggest thing was a custody battle with my son. And that was very, very difficult. But there was also some deaths that happened that were challenging. There was my marriage was not in a good situation, and that was very painful. And my kids were struggling, and my younger kids with a lot of different things. There was at one point we found out that the husband of our child care provider had been molesting girls, and he was arrested for that. And that was like a big thing that there was just a lot. And I don't know. I don't know if you want me to read some of my letter. I feel like the letter I wrote really lays it out, like what happened and how I came to get to that spot.
It does. It lays it out pretty well. It's also pretty long, so I don't want to read it on here, but if you're up for it, I can put the link in the show notes so that people can go and read it on their own if they wish.
Okay.
But the part that I'm curious about is the part where you described that you saw a demon. So your fear came true and you said you saw a demon. And that's the part that I'm like, what? So did you see this thing with your open eyes?
No.
So it was a sleep paralysis type of...
It was, yeah. The demon, you're referring to the dream I had, and it was a demon attacking me in the dream. And it had knocked me on my back, and I was just like laying on the floor, felt totally defenseless as it just cackled over me. And I woke up from that, and I was just like, my body was just clenched up and constricted, like in the bed, as if I was like laying on the floor. And I was in so much fear that I just couldn't even move. And I said, what is this? And I didn't see a demon at that point. I'd seen it in the dream. But a voice said to me, I'm Satanism. And then I was just like, God, help me, like, Jesus, like, take away the fear, like, release me, like, and just was, like, praying until, like, it just, like, released. And then I was like, what the heck? Like, what's that about?
You heard that voice audibly? Or in your mind?
I think it was in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then you started doing research on Satanism, and your first findings were kind of interesting. When I was in basic training, I think we had access to books, or maybe it was my post training or something. But I read the Satanic Bible, and I was like, this isn't really anything about Satan. Mm-hmm. And now I kind of understand why that's the case. But it's mostly to mislead. It's just to lead people in a different direction other than Christ, and it's like any path but that one. So it's all inclusive, right? Just that's a lot of what's going on today is inclusivity. Let's include everybody and do anything you want except this one, except that. And now that group is like one of the few groups that's actually being ostracized, which is strange. But what did you think when you started researching Satanism?
I don't recall everything I was reading at the time, but I don't know. I just don't understand why anyone would choose that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it doesn't directly mention worshiping Satan, right? And they don't.
Yeah.
Right. There's different.
It doesn't like, okay, we hail Satan or whatever. Right. It really is like, oh, this is our philosophy that we live by, and you can, kind of, you're empowered to do things, and like, it's not. It doesn't straight out be like, if you join, you'll be damned to hell forever. Why would anyone buy into that?
Oh yeah, our hell is the better version of heaven, that kind of thing. It's not blatant like that at all. It's actually, like you said, self-empowering, and it's almost like self as God. Mm-hmm. It teaches self as God. And that's a lot of what's going on right now in the New Age community. And you can spin it 100 different ways, but that's what it is. It's it goes back to the consciousness, or the Christ consciousness. It's the I am awareness, right? And you're not actually the I am. You are the awareness, but you are not that consciousness, that spirit.
Yeah. I have some interesting ideas about that, actually.
Tell me.
So let's see how I can break this down, because people probably wouldn't like my ideas, but it's like, whatever. Well, and I don't claim to know anything special. It's just my own experience, right? Like putting things together, trying to make sense out of everything.
Yep.
But so my feeling that I've had recently, and this is, so I do believe that we are all connected collectively, and that we are all like a piece of God. Like we we contain, because we were created by God, we contain all the ingredients, I guess, that God is, that can, that's in God, that's all in us. So I do believe like we do have God consciousness. I think that, and we all have, there's a collective consciousness and then there's like individual consciousness, but we're all ultimately connected with God. And that's kind of my belief.
So when you say God consciousness, you don't necessarily mean the awareness of God, do you?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Because if you did mean that, then you'd be capable at will of perceiving all things at all times, if you want it.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that we have that ability while we're here on Earth. I think that, we are pieces of God. We come here to have an experience, to experience all that is not love and all that is love, and have and grow and learn and expand and actually discover who we truly are. And so I think that there is like, we don't know everything. Like when you come here, like you're just starting fresh, like a fresh consciousness here to experience. So no, we don't have all the knowledge that God has. We obviously don't have all the wisdom that is contained in that. But I do feel like we are all part of that. Mm-hmm. And we're all energy, right? I mean, that's what everything is energy. God is energy. We are energy. We are part of that. And so I've been thinking about like, how does Jesus fit into like all of this and like the story of Jesus? And one of the things, and this might sound kind of crazy, but, there's a lot of, I believe that we are creating on some level our reality, right? Our beliefs play a big role in how we experience life. Our belief systems are so much of everything.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of how I can go with this, but I believe we do create things. And we create things on an individual level and we create things collectively. And we obviously can't just create whatever the heck we want to immediately. Like, I know there's new age stuff about like being able to manifest things. And on some level, I do believe that that's true because we are co-creating our experience all the time and choosing like how we want to interpret things, how we want to experience things. It's just that most of us are pretty unconscious all the time with how we do it. I have thought that maybe on some level, like collectively, we actually manifested like Jesus because we needed it so bad, like so disconnected. And collectively, you know how they say that, when there's one or more, two or more gathered in prayer, like, and gathered in my name, like how powerful that is. Well, I mean, when you join forces with anybody, like more than one consciousness there, like creates a lot more power to do something. And I was like, what if we just all at that time, the world was in such a state, people were so disconnected from God on so many levels that they were just like crying out for a savior, and like literally just like then he came. That's kind of one of the things, and I'm not saying that's the truth or whatever, but that's an idea that I have rolled around in my head recently that makes sense to me.
That's an interesting one. I haven't heard that one before. I have two thoughts about that. The first one is that based on what I know about the Bible, that would be anti-biblical, because of if the Bible is the living word of God, then it is as it says, and it basically is saying that all of these prophecies and predictions were made that the Messiah would come. Now, if that's a piece of that is like, okay, you're writing these things into existence and then it happens, like you see that actually in the film industry. You'll see a lot of like sci-fi stuff start to happen and come true, and that's a whole other topic. But that's an interesting one.
I don't know how the Bible would contradict that, though. I mean, yeah, why can't those stories be true and like?
Well, I'm not theologically, I'm not a professional, but my understanding is that the Bible says that God made us and that God sent Jesus. So if that's the case, then we didn't create Jesus, unless you're holding the perspective that we are all pieces of God and then that collectively we needed Jesus, so he came or became. Mm-hmm. And I get that. I get that mindset. That's something I'd have to throw around for a little bit.
Yeah, understandably.
Compare and contrast. Yeah, that's heavy stuff.
I don't think I ever heard anybody say anything like that. So
no,
it's
kind of like, either.
All right, but I don't know. It was just, I was contemplating a lot of these things, and like, it's just like, if we are consciousness and God is consciousness, and like we came from God created us, like we are the same stuff, and why this whole earth realm was created by God, I can't answer those questions, but I believe we're made of the same stuff, and we're all connected ultimately, and it's just like being one of my goals in this life is to always be able to have that connection and have that awareness of the fact that I am a spiritual being. And, when you think about God being a consciousness and us being a consciousness and God being love, God is love. Like, it's like, did God, and maybe he did this in like a fraction of like a millisecond or something, but did God go through any of the same process that we do with our own consciousness and like creating things like, let's create something bad. Let's create, fear. Let's create things that don't feel good just to like explore what that feels like to do that. And like, oh no, that doesn't feel good. So nix that, like, oh, and then eventually, come to the conclusion, which I think is the conclusion that we are all coming to, is that we are love. Because if we have the choice, why would we be anything different? But I think that, part of what we're doing here is exploring all possibilities of everything, of like what we want to create in order to reach the eventual conclusion, which is that we all choose love, because why wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, unfortunately not all people do.
Well, they don't, but maybe that's just where they're at in their consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that actually kind of helps me as a framework through doing therapy with people. Because when you are going to meet somebody where they're at, you do not want to be coming from a place of judgment at all. You want to be coming from a place of complete acceptance and just unconditional positive regard for somebody. And you also don't want to put your own goals onto them, your own, things that you might think is good for them or whatever, because that's not their journey. And so you want to be really careful about really respecting where someone's coming from, and being able to be in a non-judgmental place for people, being able to honor that, like, this person maybe is making some different choices than I would make. Maybe they're making some destructive choices. But I'm not going to take that over and, intervene in their journey and try to take them in some direction that I think they need to go into. No, it's about being able to meet anyone where they are where they're at on their journey, and just be like, that's okay. And honoring where do they want to go? What direction do they want to take this? What do they want to create? And supporting them to be able to do that.
Curveball.
Okay.
What if they want to change their gender?
Okay. So that is an interesting topic to bring up, I think.
And if you don't want to go into it, we don't have to. But like being all accepting with unconditional positive regard for this person wherever they're at, I get that. But then supporting whatever direction they want to go, that one's hard for me.
Yeah. So I can tell you that I did have a client assigned to me that was seeking therapy specifically for the purpose of getting you have to have a recommendation from a therapist or somebody to sign off before you get the surgery. If you're going to go through that transition, you have to see a mental health professional. So sometimes people will come to therapy. Maybe they don't really want therapy. Maybe they just want to have the surgery and they want somebody to sign off on it. And I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know that I'm comfortable with like signing off on that to begin with. I don't, and that's something that I'm still that on my journey, kind of like figuring out where I stand with that. Because I think that, you can honor where people are at on their journey and even disagree with like some of the choices that they're making.
Do you have to take any kind of an oath or any kind of guidelines like the Hippocratic Oath of any sort?
We don't take an oath, but there is the code of social workers code of ethics that we follow for my profession.
Okay, so they can't require you to be gender affirming or whatever.
No. And it's interesting when you look at like what's happening with society with that, because I do see that there's some harmful things happening there. And I the way that things have been influenced socially is that probably most of my peers as social workers are just completely like on board with like, just affirm their, we're affirming of whatever gender this person wants to be, right? And
why do you suppose that is? Why are so many people just like, yeah, go for it, do it? Like in general, regardless of what I believe about that on a moral level, it just sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah. I don't know all the factors that influenced it. It probably started really small with like, okay, let's, gay rights, like treat them equally. And it evolved.
Yep.
I think probably purposefully and intentionally with some, maybe some evil there, like just to control people, maybe purposefully.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, the issue that I have with it, and especially when they are, targeting children with these things. That's what really bothers me, because it's, children are not able to make decisions. They're not able to use alcohol. They're not able to vote. They're not able to do like all these things that are really like important decisions, and they're not able to choose their gender.
Well, their brain's not even fully formed.
No.
So, and that doesn't happen until I think the mid-20s, 25 or so, when your brain's fully formed. But you mentioned evil, and that's the thing that I see has accelerated all of this. You mentioned gay rights. That seems like the start point for me. But then somebody gave a bullhorn to this small group of people, and now it's the loudest voice, even if it's not the most pervasive actual thing. But oftentimes people tend to follow the loudest voice.
Yeah.
Or to get consumed by it. But one thing that really struck me was when I noticed that Baphomet. Do you know what Baphomet is?
Baphomet. Is that some kind of a entity, like a demon or a dark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So Baphomet is the one that the Satanists actually try to get put in front of public buildings if it has the Ten Commandments.
This is
there.
the one that's like transgender or like not male or female or
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It has female breasts and male genitalia.
Okay.
So that it's like you just look at that. It's pretty clear to me, but not everybody sees that. So that brings me to one of the other things that we wanted to talk about on our list, which is like what do we call it? Spiritual warfare or psychological warfare or both.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that spirits or demons or whatever that is plays a part in some of these issues that you find working with clients or some of these disorders that people have?
Yeah. So I feel that plays a part to whatever extent the individual believes it does. I mean, that's how strongly I think that people's beliefs shape their reality and create their reality. So like asking a client, like, what's the nature of your problem? What do you believe is happening to you? If somebody believes that they are being attacked by a demon, they are being attacked by a demon. If somebody believes that it's just something going on in their mind and that maybe medication might help them, most likely medication will help them. Like that.
So do you believe that I totally lost what I was going to ask there. Dang it. Okay. So do you think that somebody can be oppressed by a demon in their life, even if they don't believe in spirituality or demons or anything?
Possibly.
Okay.
I think because of collective consciousness, honestly. Like,
okay.
I think there's so many things that we create individually, but like collective consciousness is pervasive, and whatever the collective is creating is just as much real, you know?
Yeah, and I compare that to sound a lot. Like if we all exist on this field of wavelengths and sounds collectively as a species, then something's happening in your region, then it's going to affect you. Like you go outside sometimes and you'll feel like, oh, today's kind of a dreary day, even if the weather doesn't support that. So
yeah.
I think that's definitely a thing. But when somebody believes something, that's their reality, right? Or that's their vantage point of reality, whether it's reality or not. So would you say that those two things are separable or they're not separated? When somebody believes something, is that reality or is it just reality for them at the time?
I don't know. You're slipping into some dangerous territory there.
I know. It's all mental ping pong.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know, because I believe that we are co-creating all the time with ourselves, with God, with the collective. And so if you really step into like a belief system about something, I really think that can become a reality. Is it the ultimate reality? Like, I don't know. I mean, I think it can affect it for sure. Yeah. I mean,
it's probably like the biggest factor in people's lives and why people do what they do. It's because of what they believe.
Yes.
And you can, I guess, I don't know if I'm a good example, but I'm an example of that because I grew up just accepting this thing as if it was. And that's all that was. And that was the only reality and the truth. And that everybody either abided by that or they didn't. And if they didn't, they were wrong. And then when I started exploring, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So people are working from different vantage points all over the place. And then when I came back to Christianity, I consciously chose that, okay, now because of the experience of salvation that I just had, I'm going to walk this path.
Yeah.
And I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And the Bible is confusing to me sometimes. And I definitely have a lot of questions, but.
Well, I think about one thing about the Bible. I know I just said like people manifested him. Okay, maybe.
Right. Maybe. Yeah.
But it's huge in terms of collective consciousness. So like it's the most popular religion in the world, right? So, and if you're looking at like, individual is a small thing and collective is much more powerful. and you're looking for some spiritual answers and you're looking for like a connection with God, like that's a really easy train to jump onto. And honestly, I feel like that's the biggest path that probably stands out to people. Like if you want to find answers, you want to receive love, you want to get healed, you want to connect with God, like Christianity is the number one biggest path for you to do that. I think it's easier for us to do that because it's there in the collective and you're joining with so many people. And there's some things that about Christianity where I'm like, is this the only path? Like, are you gonna, if you don't accept Jesus, like, are you gonna go to hell? And personally, I don't believe that. I don't. And, I was watching somebody they were doing like an interview on like a YouTube thing the other day, and the guy pointed out, he was asking some like pastor or preacher or priest or something, like, so what happens to people that like never hear about Jesus? And he was like, are they going to go to hell? Because this guy was kind of like, yeah, and if you don't choose Jesus and you don't walk this path, like you're going to go to hell. And he was like, what happens to the people that don't? And he's like, oh, they're okay, And the guy was like, why did you tell me? Why did you even tell me?
Because we want your money. No, I'm just kidding.
Why would you tell me that if I have this option, now I have this reality that's existing where I'm going to possibly go to hell if I don't fully step on this faith train. And then how fair is that?
Right. That poor guy. One of the things that started me asking these questions is that I deployed to Iraq. And when 9/11 happened, I was in 6th grade. And so when that happened, I thought, oh, this is not only an attack on my nation, but this is an attack on my God. And at that moment, I decided, okay, well, as soon as I'm old enough, I'm joining the military. I'm going over there, and I'm going to basically seek vengeance. That was my perspective at the time. When I got over there, I didn't really do all that, but I did interact with people. And I talked to a lot of people that didn't speak the same language as me through an interpreter. And I got to know these people, and I realized something at that time. I was like, oh, I could have been born here. And what if these people are just born here and they're born into this belief system, just like I was born into my belief system, and they're willing to die for their God, and so am I, who's right and who's wrong? And that one is I guess it's a long and complex series of thoughts to answer that question, and I can't really do it fully, but that was one of the biggest eye-opening things, is that we're both willing to die for our God, and we believe it 100%.
Wow.
And yeah. But when it comes to Jesus, what I believe about Jesus now is that Jesus is, or was at the time he walked the earth as a person, was God in human form. I'm starting to understand the Trinity on a more of a level the more I study it. I'm like, oh, that actually really does make sense. On the surface, it's like, huh? But then I start to study, and it's like, okay, that was God in a body. And so he did have to experience what it was like to be a human, to have the urge to hurt someone, but to resist, to have lustful thoughts, but to resist. Or, well, I don't know about lustful thoughts, because the Bible says that lust in the mind is committing the sin, essentially. So I don't know if that happened. Anyway, but those examples of like, okay, well, he had to deal with these real issues and these real human level things. He had to eat. He had to walk around. He had to worry about getting, robbed or beat, or they crucified him. He knew that was going to happen. So when that did happen, that was redemption for the rest of us. And it was also I think it was God saying like, hey, I'm right here, and you guys are missing the mark, and I'm right here. So focus on this. And basically, I think that if anybody focuses on Jesus and studies and follows the way of Jesus long enough, they're going to find some things they did not expect, and it's going to be good things.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. I think it's that was one of the things with, like, coming back into Christianity was a lot of scripture reading, and having that, come alive. And part of that, connecting with really truly who Jesus was, because I don't think I ever really even attempted to comprehend that before, and yeah, what an amazing person and teacher.
Yeah.
And savior.
Yeah. So what's your relationship like right now with Jesus?
So I just feel like he is the greatest teacher, for one, an example of how to live, and he inspires me, seeing how he just overcame everything and just chose love in every single situation. Yeah, nothing compares to like what he did. So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. So yeah, I'm still learning from that. I think it's a journey of like opening yourself up to receive different things. And when you start asking, you receive the answers to things. And
yeah. So among your contemplations of what Jesus is or how Jesus fits into this whole experience of life, would you say that Jesus is the Messiah as the Bible says that he is?
Absolutely.
Right on.
Yeah. Yeah. He's amazing. And, just my inspiration, really. Like, I could only hope to be like that,
Yeah.
just, that's that type of connection, and just awareness is like awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Let's see, what else do we have? Do you want to take a break? Do you need to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
All right. Hey, listener. Quick audio note. Up till this point, Emilie and I had been wearing headphones during our conversation, and once we took a break, we realized that the headphones was actually preventing us from having a clearer conversation. So we left the headphones off after this, and the audio does change a bit. I wasn't able to figure out how to make it a ton better in my editing process, so please be aware of that. And our conversation actually seemed to get much better in both of our opinions. So here we go. And we're back.
One of my biggest issues, I think, has been to how do I make sense out of all of this stuff?
Yeah.
And I feel like part of how I've tried to do that, like, is through, first of all, I've like read a lot of the Bible, read the whole Bible, taken scripture every day, and taking in that. But also, that's not the only thing that I'm like pulling from, because I just want truth, right? So I've spent probably the last 2 to 3 years studying NDEs.
I'm in the middle of a book on that right now.
Okay. So like being like taking in like all of the things that people say that they experience, and looking at the commonalities, which is all over the world, across the globe, which is the same kinds of experiences that people are having.
Yeah.
And that a lot of watching those different experiences and just reading about it, hearing about it, thinking about it, taking what I can take from that. I feel like I'm in a place where I have it all, at least in my mind, like it all fits together as one thing. Awesome. That doesn't make anything, it's just so beautiful, really. Like, yeah. I think it's really easy to get caught on how people teach scripture.
Yeah.
Versus how it is, and that was one of the things I brought up in the section about some people, how they have trauma because of religion, and it actually pushes them away, and it's because of how it's taught. And the thing is that we can't like just take teachings from random people and like learn that way. That's not the way that we were meant to understand things. We were meant to learn through direct relationship with God. Direct, like every day.
Bring that thing a little closer to you. We can just keep doing this without the headphones or something.
Okay. Are you recording?
Yeah, it's always recording.
Okay.
But I was gonna cut this all out, but that's
yeah. So what was I just saying? We get these teachings from people. We're supposed to be in direct relationship with God. That is the way to learn, right?
Yeah.
So like I wake up every day, 4:30 in the morning, every morning, and I spend at least 1 to 2 hours every day just prayer, meditation, reflection, scripture reading, and I've done that for like 3 years at least. And like that I ask for things, and like I'm starting to learn to hear from God different things. And a lot of my understandings of the Bible and what's written do not come from somebody else teaching me that or telling me how to interpret it. It comes from just reading it and being like, meditating on it and being like, what does this mean? Or if I have a question, and the understanding will come and it'll just like open up, and it is like living word.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny you say that, because I'm in that mode right now. Oftentimes when I have a problem, I'll reach out to my friend, I'll reach out to my family, and I'll be like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. What do you think? Or I just wanted to tell you or get your perspective, whatever. Like right now, as in like the past 2-3 weeks, I've stopped doing that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not telling you about my problems because it's my problem.
Yeah.
And if this God thing is what it is, or what I believe it is, then it's gonna tell me like, this is how you do it. This is what you need to do. And it's been happening.
It works.
So I'm like, oh,
it's totally. I mean, that's the thing is like, have your own relationship, spend the time, develop it. And I remember having that same realization, just like why am I talking to? In fact, I have a really good friend who is somebody you may be interested in interviewing, and she is a medium, and she's very gifted. And I know that there's a lot of people that are like, oh, mediums, what it says in the Bible is there's negative ideas around that.
Yeah, it's controversial in Christianity.
It is. And she is not somebody that I question like at all in terms of her gift. And she is a Christian. She prays before she does every reading. She grounds herself and takes her shoes off and says a prayer. And I would not be where I am in my life without her having given me some messages like about what direction I need to go in with my career and what I need to do next and things that are going to happen. Like she has been able to accurately predict future events. She is a medium, so she communicates with people that are passed away.
That's a trip.
It will blow your mind.
Yeah.
But I would often go to her. She's like, she's somebody that she started doing readings. I would go to her yearly and like meet with her, and she would like give me a reading or whatever. And then over time we ended up becoming friends, and she now probably doesn't read for me like as accurately because we're connected, and like she can do that probably best with somebody that she doesn't know well. But I would go to her and like ask like, what do I do? What's going to happen? Like when I was distressed about the whole custody case that I went through, like she was really there for me. But I started to realize like, why am I going to any other person? Like she's going to God with her questions. Like that's her connection, and like, why do I not do that? And like, I ended up kind of just not using my friends or people as much for anything that I needed. And I ended up just asking God for that stuff. And that's very empowering. Like, I feel like
that's it. It's super empowering.
Yeah.
I feel a lot stronger and just more confident as myself in decision making. It's like, okay, I need to do that.
Yeah.
Now I know that I need to do that. And then once I do that, I know why I did it. And I know that if there's some sort of consequence from it, that's okay because I did it and I knew why.
Yeah.
So I get to deal with that. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just a great value in just having that relationship. Even this morning, like, so as I was thinking about, talking with you, and I was thinking about some of the issues that people have, like putting together like all of these ideas that are in the world and fitting it with Christianity. I was thinking about the one Bible verse, which sometimes I have gotten hung up on, which is like, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. That one kind of stands out to me because it does imply that, depending on the way you interpret it, that people that are not Christians are, just going to go to hell. They're not going to be with God. And that's the way that it's been presented by a lot of teachers with a lot of fear. And I don't think that there's fear in love. And I think that God is love. And it's interesting, but this morning when I was praying about things and kind of just like reflecting, I asked about that. Like, how do I like interpret that? Because I don't believe that to be true. Like, I believe that we are all like, God is so big. It's all of us. It's everything in the universe. It's all the energy that exists that you literally cannot miss. Like, you can't. That is my belief. That is my understanding. And so what does that mean? Why, what? And I actually got a word that came to me, which is not a word that I even like use or thought about, or I had to look up the definition of it. But it's just kind of interesting because when I was asking about that, the word esoteric, I got the word esoteric, and I'm like, what? Like, what's that? And I had to look it up, and it's basically means that it's and I can look at the definition right now and see what exactly it says, but definition of esoteric, I had it pulled up. Oh, so it's intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest.
Special knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And then esoteric is the quality of having an inner or secret meaning. This term and its correlative exoteric were first applied in the ancient Greek mysteries to those who were initiated within and to those who are not, the outsiders, respectively. So I just thought that was very interesting, and what it's like, and that word just totally was like, hit me with that word, and I'm like, so what do I take from that? And what I took from that is like basically God giving me an interpretation of that, which is that when Jesus spoke that, it was intended for a very specific audience, and it was intended for those who were initiated, who understood who he was, where he was coming from, what he represented, and it was meant for them.
Yeah.
And not that it was like meant to be used as a fear-based tool to like tell other people that like, if you don't go this one way, like you're screwed.
That's where the church has missed the mark.
Yeah.
It's all hellfire and brimstone rather than love. And that's one reason I believe that I've come full circle back to this after learning those things, after using psychedelics and understanding that this is a massive tool. What it's for and what its place is, I don't fully know, but those experiences have brought me back to this place to try and bring a greater understanding of love into the church.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that's what I'm doing. That's all I know to do right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know scripture super well, but I believe Jesus actually said not everybody's going to understand these words, or not everybody's going to understand all the words I speak or something. I know he said it in the show The Chosen. So I'm assuming that it's biblical, but I don't know.
I don't know where he said that, and I'm still, learning and taking in different parts of the Bible. And I also like, I'm lucky because I have like my parents as like a resource. So like,
Oh yeah, they both went to Bible
yeah.
school.
So, and that was 4 years. Like I think, I don't know that if you're like a non-denominational pastor, you need to do anything specific other than, yeah, I don't know. But for them, they had to study Greek and Hebrew and the original translations of the Bible, and they had 4 years of study before they could do what they're doing.
Very cool.
So if I have a question, and they're super open-minded. I mean, I can tell you this: my dad and my mom saw a UFO. Like, it came and hovered in front of their house, like, and they saw like all the lights on it, and it was like it had a whirring sound, and like they're totally like, do aliens exist? Yes. Like, do demons exist? Angels exist? Yes. Like, can you think it up? Like, yes. And they're very outside the box in terms of like their understandings of the Bible. And so, just the other day I was like, hey Dad, like, what does it say? Does it say anything about like reincarnation in the Bible? Like, what? And he can tell me like the references, and he's like, actually, it's kind of implied in the Bible that Jesus was possibly reincarnated from the spirit of Elijah, because they asked him that, and then he clarified, like, no, I'm not the spirit of Elijah.
Yeah.
And
I think what the clarification of that is that it's the Holy Spirit that's moving through Elijah as well as Jesus.
yeah, but I mean, the way that they asked it was like, does reincarnation exist? Possibly. I mean, it kind of implies that could be possible, right? That you could appear as one spirit and then come back to Earth, in another body, maybe.
Do you know the story of Elijah?
Yeah, but I don't call on me to like start explaining
No, I'm
it or
just
something.
curious. I'm in the middle of kind of studying it right now, and it's a really cool story. But do you read or listen to audiobooks?
I do.
I have a book that you might like, and it actually has to do, it's called Alien Encounters. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, wait a second, what? And I think you might have a similar reaction. So I'll send you the link to it or something if you feel like listening.
Yeah.
What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, where did they see the UFO?
Like right in front of their house.
Is this in Arizona?
Yeah, like they live like a couple miles from us. We live in Pronghorn Ranch, and they're like a couple miles over.
It was like here.
Yes, like here. And they were like scrambling to go get the phone to like videotape it, and as soon as they could get it, like it was gone. It just like whirred away, and like they're just like, they both saw it, and they were like,
where'd it go? What wow, this is happening more than normal. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say, when did this happen?
I think it was about like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have not had that experience.
Me either. And
No.
I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah, that'd be something else.
But I mean, I feel like there's, a lot of it is just what we choose to create and believe in. And it's like so much of that. Oh, the one thing I was kind of like wanting to go back to with the belief system thing and EMDR therapy is like one of the really cool things. My favorite thing about that is that we don't just work on like processing the experience that happened to somebody, like a specific trauma. We work on their belief systems about it. So like I will ask somebody, and actually it's a really cool, like the treatment planning process to do that with somebody is that you might ask them like, what's an issue that you're dealing with in your life right now that's like the biggest barrier for you or creating a biggest problem. And then they might identify something, and like maybe something that happened or just anxiety maybe. And then I'll ask them to pull up a situation where they feel that, and they'll notice that situation, and they'll notice all the emotions surrounding that. And then we follow like a string, like an emotional string backwards through their memory. And we find all the times when they felt those specific emotions, and also they'll identify a thought that they have about themselves, so a belief. So it might be something like, I'm a failure, or I don't deserve good things, or I'm unlovable, or I'm a bad person, or anything like that. And that's I would say it's a negative self-limiting belief.
Yeah.
And
is it generally the same one that happens each time?
on a particular string, you're going to deal with maybe just one.
Yeah. Okay.
But you can deal with you can do as many as you want. Like if people have, 5 different ones, you're going to maybe create a different treatment plan with things that you're going to target for each one.
Cool.
But at the initial one, it's like you have them do this float back technique where they float back into their memory and they touch on the first time that they ever felt like this negative cognition along with these same emotions. And they'll find the first time ever in their life. And usually that's significant because that's like the start. That's when it started.
And most people have the ability to go back into their memory and find that first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it'll be, you have like a unique set of emotions and feelings that are surrounding this particular thought. Like you'll find it, especially if it's a root thing that has been started in your life at this point, has been kind of growing things ever since, right? It all exists along this like vine or string.
Yeah.
And then you ask them like, well, when was it the worst? The worst where you like felt this sense of failure and these particular emotions, and they'll be able to tell you and lay it out for you oh, it was this particular time, that was when it was at its worst. What about some other times? And they'll name a few other times maybe that this particular thought and these particular emotions came up, and those become your targets, and that's what you process. And then at the end of kind of processing, we always rate their distress levels so that we can measure a 10 out of 10, worst distress in the world. A 1 would be minimal to no distress. And so they're always doing this self-rating system. So once you've processed, that you've processed it all when it gets down to a 1. And then you ask them, what do you want to believe about yourself? What do you want to believe in your life? And they go back through those same experiences, but this time it's saturated with a new belief that they're installing. And it's just awesome because, if you realize how much in control we all are, not necessarily of the things in the external world, but in the way that we interpret them.
And respond to them.
We have so much control. It's crazy. But we are, a lot of times we're operating with these subconscious beliefs. We're not even aware that we have the beliefs, and so bringing those up into our consciousness, being able to identify what they are and being able to process them in a way that you are consciously creating your narrative, your purpose of your life, your meaning behind it, what you choose to take out of those experiences, and choosing not to take pain from them, but to take all the lessons. That is such a great tool to have. And that's ultimately what we all want to be doing if we're evolving our consciousness to get to a place of love, right? Is to be able to not hold on to things like anger, fear, pain, jealousy, but be able to move through all those emotions and release it so that you can just be in a space where you're I'm good.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
Yeah. And just improve your life. Even just on a basic level.
Yeah.
Your day to day.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. EMDR, huh? Do you diagnose people?
Yeah.
That's part of your job?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the process for that?
You just, ask a lot of questions about what they're experiencing and use the DSM-5.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So just compare.
Yeah. And honestly, that is something that, it's helpful information to, but I don't really base a lot of what I do on like a diagnosis. I primarily would use a diagnosis for the purposes of being able to bill medically for it.
Oh, interesting. And you don't write prescriptions for medicine,
I
right?
do not.
You
No.
send them to someone else after saying this is the diagnosis that I've achieved.
Yeah,
based on
and say, psychiatrists are probably better equipped to actually do the diagnosing than I am. If I have a chance to defer it, I'll defer it because they're looking at, they're dealing with prescribing medications like all day long, and they have more experience with that.
including assessing an individual.
No, I might say I'm probably better at doing that. Like,
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
Being like biopsychosocial assessment, like looking at the whole picture. Yes, I'd probably do that way better than like a psychiatrist.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll defer diagnosing somebody because I'd rather not slap a label on somebody unless I have to. It can be stigmatizing, and I really see, the only purpose in that is really to inform the treatment.
It's pretty crazy. The DSM-5 doesn't talk about. It doesn't talk about the soul, right, or a spirit. But does it mention belief? Does the DSM-5 talk about belief or?
Shoot, I don't know. They revised it. It's not like a book you sit down and read.
Right.
It's like a book
Reference.
that's like, okay, like, what am I going to diagnose them with? Let's read about this,
Yeah. I was having a heck of a time in a relationship once upon a time, and so I was seeing a therapist, and I was like, can we go through all the different stuff and see if I have any of it? And we went through it all, and it was just like, no, they're pretty normal. But,
Yeah, that's
so that was
funny.
nice.
Everybody likes to, what do I have? Like,
I don't like that. I don't want that.
no. And there are some people out there that are like, especially maybe some of the younger people that I've encountered recently, where they're like, I just want to know like all the things that are wrong with me. And I'm like, why do you have to have something wrong with you? Like, what are you seeking here? And
I know. I have an answer.
Okay.
Generally, they're seeking an identity of some sort. So if they can align themselves with some sort of negative thing, if they're already having a bad time in life, they're like, oh, I'm all these negative
this
things.
will explain everything.
And that's my identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it explains everything.
Yeah.
Now I know how to walk through the world as this broken type of person.
Yeah. Well, it's like, let's just work through the symptoms. Why do you need,
Well, most people don't understand that format of treatment, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people like literally want to be a victim. And they just, want to, this is why I can't function. This is why I can't work. This is why I can't achieve these things. And
have you found a person that, like that, like chooses to believe that they have symptoms that they may not, or they start to like self-manifest these symptoms in their life? A lot of them?
I think that's an interesting question because, again, it's like we're creating all of it. So, yes, are there people that probably create way more than...
Well, outside of the trauma, the people who have been affected by trauma, they're not creating that, right?
Yeah.
They're affected by an external event. But then these other people that don't have trauma that come in...
That are like faking it or what?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Like, I guess faking it, or maybe they're seeking attention, so they choose to say they exaggerate something that may be anxiety or not. And that's like, oh yeah, I suffer from anxiety.
I don't know how much of it is an exaggeration. Like, how can you even gauge that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if someone comes in and they're like, and maybe they need attention, right? Or they need a little bit of support, or they need a little bit of love, and they're anxious, or however they describe it. Like, it's just like, all right, like, I'll just meet you where you're at. What you need, I got you. You know?
Yeah. And then some people just do create their own problems.
They do. I have one client that I have, and it's really interesting, but it's like somatic symptom disorder, and the person actually has seizures, but they're not medically based at all. There's no, extra electrical activity going on in the brain. They cannot be explained physiologically.
Whoa.
It's a trauma response, and that's actually a disorder, somatic symptom disorder. So you're creating physical symptoms in the body, and you're experiencing them.
So what causes them to break out in a seizure? Any particular thing?
Well, this particular person, I think it's interesting because it was like bright lights in the stores and stuff like that. But, there's no physiological basis for the seizures. I think it was exacerbated by stress, and, unconsciously maybe there's a want for attention or care or, that kind of thing. But it is really interesting when you deal with some of these things, including I don't have anybody that truly has like the dissociative identity disorder, the split personality thing that truly has that. But
that's the one that I've heard.
Interesting.
That's the one I've heard most associated with like demonic oppression or what's the other word? Possession.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Have you had much experience with the borderline personality disorder?
Yeah, I mean, I have some people with that diagnosis, and and the way that I see that, and all the personality disorders are learned behaviors that are typically coping skills, actually, that they probably picked up in their environment while they were growing up, and it was just ways that they were able to thrive, and then they're not always the healthiest ways. When you get out, environments change, needs change, and then you still have some of these behaviors that once worked for you and now no longer work for you, is kind of how I see it.
So what's the disconnect between having the environment change but not the behavior adapting to that change? Do you know why that doesn't adapt to the change?
I think it's just probably the length of time, and these are, this is the way they've gotten used to coping with things. And so we're not like super equipped to just be like, okay, just, some people are. If you're like walking through life and you're super open and resilient and you're like, yay, like, let's just see what things bring. But most of the time we're operating in routines, habits. Yeah. We're operating pretty unconsciously, which is amazing that we're actually able to do that. I mean, that's a really cool thing, that we can like get in the car and like drive to the store and like not even really pay attention to like how we got there, but we just are on like automatic pilot, and you're thinking about whatever, and you get to the store. Like, that's, the way that the brain works is like it creates these cool things for us where we can remember how to do things without even fully being conscious of it, and then just push play and go through the motions.
Wow. I think about those behaviors learned as a child, or as a response to your environment as a child or something. It's like when you do a behavior as a response to something, your brain like notes that, and then if it happens again, it like starts to like probably build a neural pathway for that thing.
Yes.
So then so if you're dealing with like, you're basically dealing with undoing neural pathways as far as like these ingrained behaviors. It sounds like it would take like a lot of work and a long time. Yeah. Or a disruptor. Like, I mean, that's not always healthy for people with mental health stuff, though. My thought, as far as a disruptor goes to psychedelics, those are really, really, really good at doing that type of thing and helping to see in a new light.
Yeah.
You probably know about the therapy stuff that they're doing with those right now.
Yeah, I've heard about that, and it's interesting. And I don't know how I feel about doing any of that at any point, but I'm aware of like the value of psychedelics to be able to, help you experience something different and step outside of like the typical way that you go through things
Yeah.
and your normal brain functioning, you know?
Yeah. Like puts a magnifier on some of those issues sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it is interesting.
How much do you feel that your role in people's daily lives, well, I guess weekly, so they see you for an hour every week. So how much, if I were to see you for an hour every week, how could you gauge how much of an impact you have personally on someone's life and the trajectory of their life and their choices?
Oh, gosh.
Do you feel you play like a really big part in that in some people's lives? As far as kind of
Well, some people
redirecting
them. It's different for every person, you know. I mean, I think I have some people that, you know, they probably are just like, oh, a side note, like meet with this therapist and kind of, and maybe they don't even do a lot of like the, you know, sometimes I give people assignments to do, and then it's like they come back and, oh, sorry, I didn't prioritize it. Oh, you didn't prioritize yourself this week. You didn't prioritize your own healing. But it's different for each person, you know, and I've had people that are just like, you know, I'm probably a very small part of their life and maybe gave them like a few tools that were helpful for them, and they walk away and I'm not very significant. And then I have other people that, you know, have been able to actually work through some major trauma that was like impairing them, and I see myself as just being kind of a facilitator for that. You know, it's really and they're grateful for that, like creating a space for them to then do the work, you know, but they're the ones that do the work.
And most of these people recognize that. They don't idolize you as being their, like, oh, the person that helped them or saved them from their thing.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Right on.
I don't think so. I would not. One thing I realized early on, I learned this with parenting too, is like I don't want to take the credit for like how my kid turns out, and I don't want to take the responsibility for it either. Like if they do, like I'm just like, wash my hands of that. Like I'm gonna do my best and I'm gonna show up and like do my thing, and like I'm not by any means responsible for any of like the things that turned out good, and then I'm definitely not responsible for anything that turned out.
That's my kid's choices.
Yep.
Along the way. Yeah. So do you have to see anybody that's like required to go see a therapist?
No. Right now, with what I have going on, we don't do any court-ordered therapy.
Okay.
With the
have you ever done that?
No. No, I haven't provided that for anybody. And I don't know how I'd feel about that. When I worked with kids, so I did therapy work with kids for like 3 years, and I would classify them as being involuntary clients. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to work with kids. Some people have a really good knack for that, and they're like, that's where their skill set lies. But I found it a little bit frustrating in that, like, a lot of times it's a parent. The parent is really the client. They're signing the kid up for the therapy. A lot of times they're like, okay, fix my kid. Oh. Like my kid, fix my kid. My kid has these issues or whatever. Just like meet with them and fix them.
Dude.
And it's never
fix
the kid.
Parenting. It's fix my parenting. That's what it needs to be.
Yeah. It's like, if you're going to do that, you are going to work with the whole family system and them as a whole, because there's no way that any of that's going to like get fixed without, having the parents get on board with like, how can they change, the way that they're interacting or the way that they're contributing or.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a relationship factor there. Kids not just misbehaving just to misbehave. Like most kids want to please their parents.
Yeah.
For the most part, at least to start out.
Yeah. And kids, most of the time it's like they're just trying to get needs met, and then it's like, let's just look at that, how can we meet this need in a more adaptive way? But I prefer like being able to meet with an adult that is able to kind of think about their life and really tell me like what it is that they're wanting. And I love it when people want to go like deep, like let's go to the deepest levels and like analyze this or that. And yeah, when they're really invested in that, like.
So you feel that people that are more willing to go deep are more likely to have like a good outcome, or they're more willing to address their issues?
Yeah, if they're more curious, like they're more curious about things, and they're more willing to, look at different things, whether it's negative or positive. Great. Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah. The business that I'm going to be starting, hopefully very soon, is called Life Light Counseling. And I'm going to start it like probably just telehealth to begin with, which is just all meeting with people online, not in person because I don't have an office space. And hopefully expand to an office space. But I really liked that name, which was, of course, something I had to like consult God about. Like, what do I like? What's a good name, And I just love the name that came, Life Light, because a lot of what I feel like is happening when we're working on like trauma and stuff is that a lot of people have emotions that they just were too intense when they were experiencing like something to be able to deal with it, to be able to process it, to be able to face it. And so they took all of those emotions and they just kind of like shoved it aside and like covered it up or forgot about it, and it's because it's just so painful. And one of the things that I kind of like get a visual with is like kind of being like, let's walk in with like this flashlight kind of thing. Like we're going to go to the dark places where there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of emotions that people just completely avoided because they weren't ready to go there. And it's what's awesome is when somebody's like ready to face that and they're like, I know that I'm affected by this thing and I know that I haven't like dealt with it, and because I still feel the pain from it. And then they're willing to just be able to experience it, because that's one of the things, like in order to heal it, you have to feel it.
Do you believe that if something is healed, then you will no longer feel the pain from it?
I believe so. I think it's just hard. It's hard for people to feel their feelings. But I think that that's like one of the best ways to be able to live your life is to just allow yourself to like not be resistant to it, not be in a place of fear, just like accepting like how it feels when you feel it and not shove it away in a corner or avoid it. And that's where you get a lot of substance abuse problems and stuff like that.
Good to know. Good to know. That's actually one of my next questions for you was going to be like, okay, well, how do you help someone grieve that doesn't ordinarily feel grief when it's probably should be felt?
Well, it's an interesting question because, you got to start where people are at. So like, who's identifying that they need to feel grief? Some outside person saying like, you need to feel grief, or is it the person is identifying for themselves? Like, I need to be able to like process grief, but I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be it.
Okay. Well, I think with grief, it's one of those things where you can invite yourself to start to do that. And, depending on what you're grieving, allowing yourself a space and a time to be able to just think about whatever the loss is, Feelings will come when it's like when you're, ready to feel them. Maybe not tears necessarily. I mean, people grieve in different ways, but it's all about allowing yourself to visit all of the feelings that come with whatever that loss is.
Yeah, the invitation. That sounds like a good start. Cool. Thanks. We can talk about anything. Now that we took off the headphones, I think it's like made a world of difference. And so I don't know. It's just
Something about hearing the echo of the voice.
Maybe like normally I don't usually struggle with that, but I just like felt disconnected this time. But now it's just seems way better. What else we got here? Well, we touched on religious trauma a little bit, and I wrote down incongruent teachings. So basically, if you're trying to teach a belief or basically teach the Bible, but your life or your method of teaching is incongruent with what is actually being said, then that's going to mess a lot of people up.
Yes.
And then you're, not really doing God's work at that point.
Yeah.
I think that's the way I see Christianity displayed in the world. It makes me think that that's a lot of what's going on, is that people are they're not teaching it in a way that's like really good for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that just maybe aren't connected. I mean, there's probably a lot of people that get into leadership roles in spiritual communities, in churches, that they're motivated not by like the right motivations, maybe, of like, I'm really seeking to like follow Jesus and like live that life and like bring other people to that. I think maybe there's some more things that are appealing about those roles, like being in a position of power or, because
I was trying to think of one. I was like, what other motivation would there be for doing that type of a thing?
yeah,
Power.
It is power.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, you get to have...
Yeah, people trust you with their soul, in a sense.
Yeah, they're going to really turn to you. You're a very important person. You get to get up in front of everybody all the time. And
yeah, they feel recognized when they talk to you.
You have a purpose, But yeah, you can't just... you can't be like unconsciously doing that kind of a role, But I think some people are. They're just like, I'm a preacher at a church or a pastor at a church, and I just live my life. And
well, that's one of those things though, where when you have an experience of God, when you experience the Holy Spirit or some sort of movement of God within you or in your life, that's like a big moment. And you know why? Because most of the rest of the time you're not experiencing that moment. So it feels like it's something major, because it is. And then if that's the thing that inspires you to go learn and teach the Bible, well then, some people get caught into going through the motions, hoping for that type of thing to happen again. Whereas the real teachers are like, I guess the Bible would say the Spirit is upon them. So it's like they're living it kind of all the time. Not that they're feeling that level of impact all the time,
right?
But they're in that mode, all the time, rather than going through the motions.
Yeah, I would want to know that like the pastor is like spending an hour a day praying. You know what I mean? I would want to know that. That'd be pretty important to me. Like, or
if they get out of church and go to the bar and hang out for 4 hours, like, you want to know that one too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of people that unfortunately have really been traumatized by some of the religious teachings.
Have you worked with many of those people?
Some of them, yes. Some of them I just know personally. Like my sister-in-law was very much like traumatized by the church and religion. And she talked about just like, I don't know, even she told me this story. It was horrible. I was like, this is traumatizing. So like she was in like a Sunday school or youth group, like when she was a teen, like 13 years old, 14 years old. And the people in this group like passed around like an Oreo cookie, and they're like, everybody like pass this cookie around, and if you want to like take a bite or lick it or do whatever, like you just pass it down. And then they pass this Oreo cookie around, and then they're like, this is what happens like when you have sex before marriage. You're like the cookie, And everybody gets a taste, and like, because they were like, oh, do you want this cookie now when it's fresh? And then at the end they're like, oh, who wants this cookie? And everyone's like, keep the cookie.
I see.
Yeah. So it's like kind of this thing where like you're not pure anymore. You're unwanted. You're unloved. Like you're no good anymore. And there was a lot of things like that unfortunately was very traumatizing in the way that you go about living your life, the way that you even feel about your body, as a woman, or feeling like you need to cover up things and there's shame there that's put, it's just, there's a lot. And fortunately for my sister-in-law, like she was able to move past all of that and is still, like her faith is stronger than ever. But for some other people, they just are like, I'm done with that. My trust was violated. They were teaching me fear, and I don't ever want to go back.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a weird way to teach that. I get the concept, but I mean, first of all, it's not really true.
Yeah, no.
It's not really true. So, but I get like kind of where they're coming from, I guess. But that
it's
sounds
just
like
a fearful way of like presenting something. I mean,
that sounds like a teaching from a man in power who's abusing his power.
Yeah.
I think I had an experience when I was in church camp as a kid. The church I went to, they violated my trust as far as, and like my feeling of safety. They at the time there was this big fear going around of like there was like school shooters and stuff, and there was a big fear of like church shooters, people coming in and shooting up congregations. And that was I guess a big fear in my church at the time, or some one person in the church, maybe it was their fear, and they decided to bestow it upon everybody else. And so at youth camp, I'm like 13, and at youth camp, it was like 7 or 8 or 9 p.m. and we're all gathered in the church camp building. We were doing a service or whatever. And then during the service, they decided to stage people coming in with guns.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is, no.
Yeah.
Just no. Bad idea.
It was horrible. I was so scared. And like, are they going to kill us or?
Oh my God. What a horrible idea.
After not too long, I was able to tell that it was not real, because they weren't really like, they couldn't stay in character very well. And I was a little actor at the time, so I could kind of tell, these people are not being consistent. but still the initial impact of that was like, oh no.
Yeah.
So yeah, super disappointed in that.
That was horrible.
Yeah, it was a wild time. What do you know about cognitive dissonance?
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, do you know?
So.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, do you know what it is, like what that means, or how would you describe what it is?
Yeah, I guess off the top of my head, like, not being able to, like, reconcile certain ideas or wrap your mind around them, maybe. And so, I mean, I think this is what's coming to my mind. I don't know the actual definition.
I don't think that's it. I think it's like
being able. Well, yeah. Let's just look it up and tell me what.
I just want to know, because I like to ask like what you think it is, what I think it is, and then what this says it is, so that we can get 3 different perspectives. Because people walk around through life thinking this thing means this thing, when it might mean something totally different, and then they operate based on what they believe that thing means.
Yeah.
So this is.
Yeah, I think it is what I thought. Where it's saying that you have discomfort, which results to holding on to 2 conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes. So when people hear an idea or see something that doesn't resonate with what they already know, they might reject that idea.
Even if it's true.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. And at the same time, it doesn't make sense. It's unfortunate that people operate that way.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where, I don't know how you feel about this, but do you believe that there are chemtrails in the sky, like things being sprayed over us? Do you believe that? Can you wrap your mind around that idea, or what are your thoughts about that?
I believe that is definitely possible, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was something that's happening because of the other things that I've looked into as far as oppressing people on large scales. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's happening. Do I have proof that it's happening? No.
Yeah.
Do I sometimes feel this is a fun one when I, like you'll see sometimes in the morning that the planes will fly over and then the trails stay and then they expand and then they lower.
Mm-hmm. And there's like a crisscross pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, wow,
so
they're really covering this area.
And they call I think there's I don't know what entity, but they call it cloud seeding. Mm-hmm. And they're dropping different types of metals into the air. I don't know what for, but I noticed that I get headaches when that happens. Mm-hmm. So this is a funny thing. Like if it wasn't real and I was watching that happen and getting headaches, then my belief would be that it's causing me to have a hard time and breathing and have a headache. Mm-hmm. But I think that is actually what's happening.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a good portion of people that they can't wrap their mind around, like that somebody would take an airplane and go and spray like heavy metals and things that might affect our immune systems or whatever for the purpose of controlling weather or whatever they're going to say it's for. And they really cannot like see that as being real. So they just totally reject it.
That's interesting. Yeah. There's also people that don't want to know.
Yeah.
So they reject it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that's happening, it's too scary, too big, too
I
out
think
of my
all of that
control.
is cognitive dissonance that's happening. Yeah. So it's too much.
Yeah. It's gnarly. What else we got here?
So my sister-in-law, at one point when I was really seeking, so this was like a few years ago, I was just like, why are we here? Like, what's the purpose? And, she's really cool. She's into marketing. And she can do things really fast. Like she could like build a business for somebody in like 5 minutes or something. I don't know. She makes websites like instantaneously. She's like a superhuman. But anyway, She's like, I know, I have an idea. Let's make a little website where we can just ask that question and then anyone could just get on there and they can just like answer the question like, why are we here? And I was like, cool. So she did, which now I don't remember what the link is or where she put it or anything. But I was like taking notes and asking people to like answer that question, like, why are we here? And I didn't answer it for myself, but I got some answers from my dad and I got her answer and I wrote those down, and then I finally wrote my own answer recently.
So, Emilie, why are we here?
So we are consciousness in discovery of itself, and we are collectively and individually in the process of creating and playing out every possible outcome in order to understand the true nature of what we are, which is ultimately love.
Beautiful. Well, I think we can wrap it up right there. That sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and being curious and for what you're doing with just opening up this forum for like different people to share their experiences. I just love that.
Yeah. And I think through that, I don't remember what the little subtitle I wrote for the podcast description was, but it's something that has to do with helping to create conscious understanding between people one conversation at a time to help the world improve. Mm-hmm. Because as much as we are a group of people, we can't, obviously politics shows we can't really agree on a common goal. Mm-hmm. So it's really the individual work that makes the biggest difference.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. I work on that level too. Just
exactly.
Let's work with each individual and like start with that.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. Well, thanks for what you do. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can talk again sometime.
I hope so.
All right.
Thanks.